Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is our 33rd installment of Pinch Hit Friday. Really enjoyed these kind of short Friday morning snippets. Hopefully you have as well. And we've covered a wide variety of topics, but today I actually want to talk about something that's kind of fresh in my mind just because we do see a lot of younger athletes in particular at this point in the year at the facility, simply because a lot of our pro and high school and college guys are out playing. So the other day on the training floor, I was chatting with Andrew Lissy, who's our longest tenured coach at our Florida facility. And on the floor were two separate athletes. Both of them are super locked in kids. One of them started at age 12 with us and is now 15. So he spent a lot of time in the gym with us and has absolutely embraced the training process. He's a guy who can come in and set himself up on the force plates. He knows exactly how to do it. Really, really locked into his program. Asks a lot of great questions about nutrition and what he can do outside of the facility. And unsurprisingly, he's made ridiculous progress. One of the coolest transformations we've seen. And he's got a really bright future, in baseball, strength and conditioning, whatever it is he decides to do. And then at the same time, on the other side of the facility, we saw a 13-year-old athlete who's equally locked in, is making progress. He's kind of at that stage where he's, gradually built up a goblet squat from, his first days in the gym. Both these guys are, various stages of puberty. And so we were talking about how, the younger guy has to consciously resist the temptation to chase advanced programming. Like we can actually do a lot more cool things with that 15-year-old who's been around for 3.5 years and is effectively training almost like he would if he was a junior or a senior in high school at this point. And I think the trap of complexity lures a lot of people in. People want the advanced program when they should be asking for the programs that created the adaptation that made those high-level athletes advanced over time. And I often tell the story. Tim Collins is one of our, most well-known pro guys over the tenure of Cressey Sports Performance. Tim was, signed as an undrafted free agent in 2007. He was 5'5", 130 pounds. And over the years that followed, we put 40 pounds on him. And before you knew it, he was throwing in the mid-90s, pitching in the big leagues. And Tim had a great big league career and, is now doing some coaching. But it was amazing when Tim made his major league debut back in 2011, the number of people that reached out to us and said, my son is just like Tim Collins. I just need the program, for 5'7" lefties that need to throw 95. I'm sure you have it. It's the unlock. And it's, we looked back on the 4 or 5 years that Tim had put in to get to that point. So it was kind of a joke back then, but I've realized over the course of time that there are a lot of parents, coaches, kids who just think that they need to chase really, really advanced programs when in reality, the greatest success stories are usually born out of doing a lot of the mundane basic things over an extended period of time. And in doing so, what you're doing is you're earning adaptation. So I want to talk a little bit about that in this podcast today. Relatively untrained athletes, we all see this, like they get pinned on a dumbbell bench press, right, at 30 pounds. And then all of a sudden they bang out 5 more reps in that same set. But it's asynchronous recruitment, right? Not to get too fancy here, but basically asynchronous recruitment tells you that untrained athletes can kind of turn on and turn off slow twitch muscle fibers to accomplish things. They can't really tap into this high level of neural efficiency they need to really recruit these high threshold motor units and a lot of those fast twitch fibers that allow them to do these powerful movements, at really, really high levels. And this is one of the initial adaptations that we see with athletes over the course of the first, 3 to 5 months of strength training as they learn to recruit more things. The quality of movement just gets a little bit better. So they get a ton stronger, even if it's the kind of thing where they actually don't get a lot bigger, particularly in prepubescent athletes. So that's one adaptation that we see in young athletes who just consistently show up is the movements obviously get better, they get more technically proficient, but in part it's taking place because they are tapping into higher threshold motor units. We also know that consistent strength training improves androgen receptor content in the target tissues, right? So you're more sensitive to the effects of the testosterone surge that kicks in during puberty will have on you. So we get more cross-sectional area, we get more force production potential from that as well. And certainly we see body composition benefits when, kids are really, really active in strength training, like there's glucose disposal, there's better sensitivity to insulin that goes along with that. So they tend to be healthier, less likely to develop, childhood obesity and things along those lines. But, we're talking very nuanced, but these are just speaking to some of the adaptations that take place on a scientific level. But in a more like kind of subjective way, if you talk to a lot of major league hitters, you'll hear them say, I hit with my hands, I throw the knob to the ball. And the truth is that that's just a conceptual model that they have in their brain. The reason they can say things like that is because they've spent years and years building up strength, power, work capacity, and the right sequencing so that they can effectively take their lower half contributions for granted, right? Those athletes do an amazing job of working into the ground and transferring force up, to their hands. So I think that's a really, really important message for young athletes is you can't always just adopt a cue from a high level athlete who already has far more adaptations than you ever could. So you have to be really, really careful about adopting somebody's entire methodology when you haven't achieved that level. So the challenge in all this, unfortunately, is that everyone adapts at different rates. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I see coaches and athletes make with respect to strength and conditioning programs is that they assume adaptation is taking place just because a kid has shown up or because they've aged. But the truth is that everyone's going to respond to a different stimulus differently. So adaptation should be earned and not assumed. The obvious follow-up question to that is how do you evaluate progress beyond just an eye test? Hey, they look like they're hitting the ball harder, or they look more efficient on the mound. I think this is where objective measures like force plates. We use the Proteus for power testing. You can use the 1080 for a lot of sprint testing. And then also just, pen and paper or app-based documentation of strength and power improvements that are taking place in the weight room. Those are all really helpful objective measures that effectively quantify that someone has put in the work and adapted. You also have long-term changes in joint range of motion, like making sure that kid doesn't lose, not just the ability to touch his toes, but does he lose 15 degrees of hip internal rotation as he goes through puberty and a couple years of training? Or maybe it's an athlete that showed up and was in pain, right? They had a growth plate fracture when they first started training with you, and then their symptoms go away and they're able to play healthfully. Like games played is actually a pretty good objective measure. Attendance is a great objective measure. I'm really careful in a baseball world about claiming adaptation when I see that pitching velocity has increased or exit velocity for a hitter has increased, because these things can sometimes improve just by a heavy specialization that can actually increase injury risk. So as an example, if I have two baseball players who both throw 80 miles an hour at age 15, and they both get to 86, but one of them got that way by eating right, getting on a good strength program, throwing med balls, doing arm care exercises, and the other athlete just went on an aggressive throwing program. One of those athletes has built a really, really good pyramid with a strong foundation that's going to support long-term adaptations. The other athlete is kind of sold out for the quick gains, and they're not necessarily supported by a really strong foundation. So I'm very careful about just chasing velocity measurements in baseball players as measures of adaptation. Those are performance outcomes, but they aren't necessarily supported by a really, really strong foundation. So don't just throw aggressive throwing programs in unprepared teenagers. That makes them more likely to get hurt. What we actually want to do is we want to build a broad foundation upon which some of those later interventions, whether it's a throwing program, a mechanical adjustment, whatever it may be, can really take root in something that's substantive. So two key points as I follow up to this. This is one reason why we use a conjugate periodization model for all of our programs at Cressey Sports Performance, right? We can train all the qualities, whether it's strength or power, endurance, but we can fluctuate which is the priority based on, an athlete's specific need for adaptation and, the time of year, right? When our pro guys come back from a long season, like they probably need to recoup some strength, no doubt about it. They need to get more powerful, all that stuff. But early on, we've got to build a little bit of a foundation of work capacity. We've got to put some muscle mass back on them. So we're going to do a little bit more volume early on so that we can build that broad foundation and then layer some strength, layer more power on top of it. But we're always training these things just in different, kind of amounts throughout the year. And then certainly the older you get, the worse a one-size-fits-all program is going to be for development. So you can't evaluate adaptation unless there is good documentation. And if it's just one program written on the dry erase board and 20, 17-year-olds all come in and do the same program and there isn't good documentation, there isn't individualization in terms of exercise selection or the amount of weight used or anything like that, you see a lot of kids that get left out in the cold with respect to chasing the specific adaptations that they want. And I think this is why we've had a lot of success in the baseball world is we treat everybody as a unique individual and we make sure that The programs are really matched up to what their unique needs are. So individualization is a hallmark of what we do at CSP. And I think it's vitally important for advanced high school athletes, college athletes, certainly professional athletes. More importantly, though, it has to be synced up with the skill development side of things. Your pitching and your hitting coaches should know about how an athlete moves before they step into a cage or onto a mound. They need to know what your hip structure is, how your shoulder range of motion stacks up, what's your force production potential, do you have an extensive injury history? All these things that strength and conditioning coaches, rehabilitation specialists can kind of help to assess and relate in order for the skill development coaches to really do their job well. So anyway, longer podcast relative to some of the other ones today, but I do think it's really, really important that you have to earn adaptation, right? It's not something that's just assumed. With that said, if you're looking to learn more about our unique offerings, visit CresseySportsPerformance.com and fill out the easy contact form to tell us about yourself, your needs, and we'll see if it's a good fit for you to start some training with us, visit our facility, or even just work in a remote context. Thanks for listening and have a great weekend. This episode is brought to you by First Form, an awesome supplement company with a comprehensive product offering that I enjoy using myself and with our athletes. Beyond the broad product line they offer, I also love First Form's commitment to ensuring that their products are the highest quality. They meet NSF certified for sports standards for both consistency and purity. Their Formula One protein powder is the best tasting option I've had in over 20 years in the fitness industry, and they've got several great flavors to choose from. I also lean on their creatine monohydrate to support hard training, their collagen for joint health, their magnesium to help with sleep quality, and their fish oil for a variety of health benefits. Our daughters and I also share a love for their high-protein meat sticks, which have become a big hit in the Cressey household for school lunches and on-the-go protein options as we head to gymnastics and softball practices. Of course, First Form products also have been really popular with our athletes at Cressey Sports Performance, and they're used by some of the top-performing athletes and most recognizable sports franchises in the world. Above all, the people at First Form are top-notch, and that's a rarity in an often unethical business. First Form is dedicated to empowering people on their fitness journeys, and that dedication is matched by only their unwavering commitment to exceptional quality and unparalleled customer service. Check them out for yourself at www.firstform.com/Cressey. That's 1stphom.com/CRESSEY and get free shipping on your order of $75 or more. Additionally, they're offering an amazing 10% more than your money back guarantee if you're not fully satisfied with your purchase. Again, that's firstform.com/Cressey to get free shipping on your order of $75 or more.